It's time for another episode of The Cheat Sheet. The podcast where we interview top VCE performers and deconstruct the strategies they use to achieve incredible results at school and in life.
Hello everyone, it's Monique here today and I'm joined by Jessie. Hey Jessie, how you going?
Hey, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Fantastic, I'm really good. We're going to talk about your VCE experience, which I think is one that's quite unique and I think our listeners will get a lot out of it. So Jessie completed 2 Unit 3-4 subjects in 2014, I believe.
Yeah,
and took a bit of time off studying for a little while and is back at it this year, completing her VCE. Tell us sort of where you're at right now, Jess.
Cool. Well, I am in year 12 this year. For the second time, I'm doing it through distance ed, which is basically homeschool. There is a campus in Thornbury, but I do it through correspondence, and so I really get to kind of set my hours. I learn through the teachers that they provide at the school, and I can contact them at any time, but mainly I teach myself through their coursework and books and kind of set my own thing. So the subjects I'm doing for that are literature 3-4 and further mathematics 3-4.
Great.
Yeah.
And in terms of assessments, how does that work if you're being homeschooled?
Yeah, so you have to pick a supervisor at the start of the year. So for me, that was my mum because I'm living at home. And she basically is in correspondence with the school too. They send her the SACs and things like that. And I guess it's in her own discretion to keep that to herself and not let me access that. And so there are a number of rules and things that she make sure that I follow, but I can set my SACs in my pajamas on a Thursday morning if I'd like to, and it's great.
That's certainly handy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great.
And have you found what sort of challenges and I guess advantages are there if you're studying through distance education?
Yeah, well, like I said before, I really love the flexibility of it. It's great for someone who probably prefers to be self-directed and motivated in how they learn. There might be ways that in a mainstream school don't necessarily complement the way you learn. Whether that be like you find it hard to sit in a classroom and you need a little bit more of different areas that you study. So I can grab my things and go and study with Macca's free Wi-Fi, or I can go to the Bowen Library with friends who are doing their uni study or their own work, and I have the flexibility to do that, as well as, I guess, there are challenges in that you don't have a physical teacher who's keeping you on top of it. It's much more like university, I hear. I haven't been to university yet, but I know that it's preparing me in the long term very much more for organisation and controlling, I guess, deadlines and the way that I receive information and interpret that to get the results that I want. It's very much more in my control than, I guess, external responsibility that you would have in a mainstream school. Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like you've got a lot of sort of independence and you need to be very self-motivated to make sure that you're on task and things like that.
Yeah.
Okay. And why did you decide to, so we did mention that you had a bit of a break before you came back to studying and finishing year 12 this year.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to go back and finish off those 2 subjects?
Yeah, well, I guess, when you're young, sometimes it's really hard to know what you want to do. Especially seeing too far into the future can be really intimidating and daunting if you don't have certain passions at the time. Or so I found when I started VCE in year 11, I did 2 subjects early, like you mentioned, and so I really did feel like the pressure for results and things like that were very, very high. And I guess in a way I felt like I was achieving for something that I didn't know was going to help me in any way. I didn't have a goal that I was trying to reach with those results. I was kind of just blindly moving through with what I was told to do. And so when I kind of was able to step back during a break from VCE, I kind of was able to develop as a person, a lot more to do with my identity and the things that I really did love and wasn't just taught to love over my period of schooling, pursuing relationships that I wanted to pursue and not necessarily who I was forced into a classroom with. Things like that you take for granted or you just kind of blindly miss when you're in school. But as soon as you take a step out, you can kind of, I found a lot more of my identity when I took a break. So when I came back, I knew that I didn't come back because I had had a break and I needed to go back to school. It was kind of more, I had some new passions that I discovered. I knew that there was something I wanted to do in university to help with my future goals. I knew that it's what I wanted and not what somebody else had told me, basically. Yeah, so I knew VCE was a stepping stone to do even more of my bigger goals.
And do you have a vision of what you want to maybe study in the future at university?
Yeah, to an extent. I say that I have bigger goals now only because I have a lot more that I have as possibilities. I know that I will talk with Steve more about this later, but having started a videography business, that came out of passions, and I knew that there was a lot that I could do naturally with my passions and abilities, but there were certain things with starting a business and with growing a business that I couldn't do just through learning and trial and error, which is where tertiary would come into play, studying business or studying film and things like that. But then there's other things that I love and might want to do in the future with a career in nutrition or in personal training, things like that I don't have a set path. I guess I just am really excited to see what kind of path I want to go down by the end of my VCE, but knowing that I have lots of options, but there are specific options and not just feeling like I had a dead end and had to make a decision. I don't know if that makes sense.
No,
but
that does make sense.
Yeah.
So VCE is kind of like that gateway for you, opening up the doors to study those things that you actually are passionate about.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. And one of my questions that I have here is what challenges did you face going from a school, as you mentioned, that was quite academically focused?
Yep.
And as you said, when you were doing your 3-4 subjects in 2014, it was a lot about the marks, and now you're talking about how homeschooling is very sort of independent and self-motivated. What was the transition like between those two contrasting academic lifestyles, I guess?
Yeah, it was hard, to be really honest. I've always been someone who I found that I was taking work from school, and I knew what I had to achieve, but I would take it and I would do it in the time that I set it aside to it, and I would rather than use the teaching time that I had learning from my teachers, I was using my own time to achieve the same results that the kids in class would do. So I already kind of noticed patterns of me doing my own learning still in that environment, which is funny to look back now. I notice it more than I did at the time. So I probably wasn't utilizing my resources there, but maybe I think it was more not my kind of style. And so going into self-directed learning, you do need to be disciplined, and coming from an academic focus, and in a sense, I guess you have things spoon-fed to you and the information spoon-fed to you. So if you were taken out of that context, you might not be able to answer any of the same questions if they were reworded. Things like that, where you can just kind of spill out a textbook but not learn it and understand it for yourself. It's funny. There are a number of things. A challenge that's more to do with I guess on a personal basis is when you are in an academic mainstream school, you are kind of forced to build relationships in that sense, and have friendships from people in your classes and things like that. And well, you're not forced to, but you're encouraged to. When you get out of that and you are homeschooled or in an environment where you don't see other people, or you're not put next to other people when you learn. There are times where you need to prioritize relationships and pursue that kind of social need for interaction and things like that. And so that really develops you as a person in that kind of level. There's so many tiers to it, but academically, I think you can still learn all of the same things. It comes a lot from an internal drive, and I think some people would struggle to do well academically in self-directed learning if you didn't have an internal drive or a really, really strong support system pushing you to get those goals, like having tutors and a family that wants you to succeed. And that can be good and bad, but I mean, with homeschooling, there are a lot of other circumstances that kids do it, and they need space and they need time, and you can do it over 4 years, you can do it over 20 years. It's a lot more to do with helping you rather than you helping a school or being put into that, if that helps or makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. So you decided that homeschooling was catered better to your learning style, and you've now sort of looking at it retrospectively, it makes sense to you that that's why that you had that transition. I was wondering if you could give us a bit of a background maybe on what made you decide to transition from mainstream schooling to self-directed learning, and maybe if you could give some of our listeners who might have decided that they had that mainstream schooling style is not for them, what sort of options that they have, and what sort of I guess boxes that they need to check to say if they want to take on that challenge that you've taken on.
Yeah, cool. Well, I guess for me, my experience was I was brought up in mainstream schools with very highly academic focused in high school, and I got to year 11 and I had completed 2 year 12 subjects already towards my ATAR, and was looking at the I think the expected subject. I'm kind of trying to recall. I think it was it 5 or 6 subjects that you were expected in year 12
yeah,
to
5
do.
subjects classically is what people would do.
So when it got to the end of year 11, I was thinking about what I could do in year 12, and I had a lot of personal things going on that made getting through year 11 quite difficult. I mean, I was utilizing the services at school to get through that year, but I didn't really know what my options were, and I knew that if I got above 40 in both my subjects, I could do 4 subjects rather than 5, and to me that felt like a very big kind of lifted off my shoulders. And I didn't get those results, and so I kind of was taken aback and not realizing that there were options out there. I kind of freaked out, and so I spoke with my parents, and I had a really good support system with them. I know there are people who maybe don't have the communication with their parents that might find that very difficult, but talking to someone who is outside of the school environment, who can give you kind of a bit more insight into the possibilities that you have. The biggest thing I learnt was that VC isn't the be all and end all, and most importantly, it's not who I am as a person, and a number can't define who I am. And so I guess I'd been brought up kind of thinking that that was my end goal. And after that, if I couldn't achieve that, that was just out of the question, because that was all I had worked for, and I didn't see beyond that. And so I did have discussions with the school, and they allowed me to do, they agreed that it would be wise to do no more than 4 subjects. But as I started the year, it already began to be too overwhelming, and I had to pull back from that, which meant then looking at my options of homeschooling with GCV, or I could go to RMIT TAFE in a more lecture kind of environment where I'd still have contact hours, but I would do all of my assignments and basically all the other learning and homework outside of that, but I would be lectured all the material rather than interactive classes. And then there were big classes like at the CAE where they would clump all of your learning. It would still be in a classroom environment, but it would be all in your week's worth in one block. So you would have, I think it's 4 hours altogether in one session per week. And so we looked at that with the careers counsellor, and she had some great advice and knew a lot about what she was talking about. And I felt like she kind of gave a less biased view of what my options were rather than an academic pointed thing. And so I decided to do 2 subjects through DUCV and do studio arts with the CAE, so that I was still seeing some people in my week. I wasn't completely pulling back, and that I was doing art in like the ideal sort of situation where I had 4 hours to just roam free and do my studio arts.
And all the resources and everything.
Yeah, exactly. And so at the time that was fantastic. And I did that for probably 4 months. I made some great friends straight away. It was, a real blessing to do that. But as things progressed, most of my struggles were to do with mental health. I fell into a really bad depression and PTSD. And so that all started to come up as I spent more time trying to push through schooling, but with the academic focus and pressure taken off, I was kind of able to see that I didn't really feel I had any identity, and I was kind of lost amongst that, as well as my depression and anxiety and things on top of that just kind of tore that all down. So I had a lot of soul searching to do, I guess.
Yeah.
So when it got very, very bad, I did pull out of school because, not ideally, but because I was seeing a psychiatrist at the time who thought basically that rather than be hospitalized at the time, that I should take a holiday at home approach and basically pull back from everything. And my parents were thankfully very, very happy to help me do that because I did not want to go into hospital. I felt like that would be the end of the world, and it's not, again, but it worked for me. And during that time it was really, really hard, and I saw all of my friends graduate and go to their formals and do everything that I wanted to be doing. And and I just didn't know what to do at the time. But thankfully enough, things started to change very, very quickly. I didn't know that was going to happen. But within the end of the year, I guess I had already started to do a lot more with my time. I wasn't just in bed, and I wasn't just sitting there crying and waiting for something to change. I started to do things that I loved. I started to figure out what things I wanted to do with my spare time, because when you're sitting there, you kind of aren't forced to do anything. You can kind of have a fiddle with whatever you want to do and realize what you actually love. And so I started to make videos and fiddle around with my camera, and and I started a wedding video business that was still a baby at the time, but it was an idea and it gave me something to do. And as things progressed, I also started to get back to the things that I wanted to be doing. And so it's hard to recall at the moment. It's still all a bit fresh, and so I don't know the exact things of when things changed.
Because I was going to ask you that question, if there was a moment or like something that someone said that made you sort of have that turnaround and follow that passion of yours. And
I wish that there was. At the moment, I don't think I can recall. But I just remember it being a much quicker recovery than I thought. And I had a really good group of friends that were in my life that kept me going, and that support system was really important in my recovery. But like I said, I think identity had a lot to do with it. And so as I started to discover what I wanted to be doing and who I was as a person, I started to realize where I wanted to be. And it wasn't just looking into the past, which was a lot to do with my mental health, was looking back at what I should have done and could have done and wished I was doing. It was looking to the future and actually starting to have goals and hopes and dreams and things that 6 months ago I wouldn't have had. And as I started to notice my mental changes, I started to fall in love with health and fitness, which started to then have a really positive effect on all sorts of things. And things like that just began, and I decided that I wanted to head back to school and finish what I started, not for anybody else, but for me. And that was a really important thing. Just doing something that I wanted to be doing, and knew that it would help me. So I started to have, I was looking into degrees that I wanted to do. I wasn't too sure when I started. I just knew that it was what I wanted to do and that it would lead me into good things. And so, I decided to do it. I started with 3 subjects, and I knew that only 2 was what I needed to get an ATAR, and that's all I wanted. And Mum said to start with small goals. And so we said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to prioritize my health, and I want to prioritize finishing my VCE. And so throughout this year, it's still had its struggles, but I've become a lot more in control with keeping my depression at bay. I do think that I've recovered completely from where I was. I could talk about mental health in a totally different thing, but mainly that I'm much more on top of it than it being on top of me. And so I think it's given me a lot more insight into viewing the world and viewing challenges, and I guess I'm much more of a determined person than I was before. But it's great. It's shaped me as a person. And so now the goals that I have are achievable ones. They're not completely blown out of the water. They're just, things that I head for each day. And that's something that the fitness community gave me as well, was support, but also achievable goals that I was doing, and I was smashing them. And the endorphins are amazing too. But
Definitely helps.
Exactly. But all of those things sort of contributed to now the person that I entered VCE as this year, and to complete was I knew what I could handle, and I each day when a decision comes up or a challenge comes up, I have to go, well, is it prioritizing my health? Is it prioritizing my VCE? And if it's not, then it can give it a miss. And so far, so good. It was a bit of a long story, but that's my main thing.
It's such a great story to hear, though, because it's such an inspiring one, I think, and it's nice to hear it in its entirety. And I think that I'm sure that there are a lot of listeners out there that are quite potentially in some of the situations that you've been through, and to hear that story, I'm sure, is very, very reassuring. I think from what you said, that it sounds like it's very important to have a strong support system around you if you're in a similar situation, and also seek out that advice and those answers from people like careers counselors and parents and people who are close to them.
I think the main thing, if anybody feels like they might be going through similar things, my biggest thing though would be, like, it's great to talk to someone, and first of all to kind of, if you think that could even be a possibility, to chat and find out if that's a path that might be coming up. But my main thing would be then to figure out what you need. It can be great people telling you what they think is important, but for a while I knew what I needed to be doing, but at the time I don't think it was what my body and my mind needed. And so the more I now know to listen to myself sometimes is a really important thing. So that would be, my main tip is just, like, actually listen to the small voice inside of you that's telling you that you need a break, or you need to stop listening to what everybody else is telling you, and just kind of sit with yourself and figure out who you are and listen to that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Explore the other options, because there are more options
There
out
are
there than
heaps
just
of
the
options.
classical
And
mainstream
I
school.
went back to VCE, but like there's like VCAL, which doesn't even give you a mark, which is fantastic too, and that works for people that maybe want a more hands-on kind of thing and a less stressful environment, but still wants to be achieving and in a community. And then, I mean, if I kept going down the small business sort of thing, I know that if I went down that path, things would still be achievable and I would still be in a great place. It doesn't mean there's a right or wrong or anything like that. It's just feeling like where you want to be. That's, yeah. There are so many options. So, yeah.
Thank you, Jessie. And speaking of that small business and following your passions, you did mention that you have a business that you started up yourself since leaving school, and since the end of last year, was it, that you started this one?
Yeah, end of last year. Yep.
So tune in 2 weeks' time to hear Steve have a chat to Jessie about how she's running a business while completing VCE. Thank you, Jessie.
Like this episode? Head to thecheatsheet.net.au for show notes, real-life cheat sheets, and links to our social media pages. Thanks for listening.